Hi folks, Roland Martin here, and welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm asked a question, one question more often than any other question, and that is, so many people say, what is the number one lure? What's the number one way to catch a bass from Connecticut to California? And I say, you know, if you really want to get down to it, some form of a plastic worm is the key. Now, what do you mean by some form? There's 3 or 4 ways of fishing a plastic worm, and I'm going to talk about that today. But the main thing I'm going to talk about, the main thing I'm going to bring to the thing, I'm going to bring some super tips to the table. Let me just show you what I like to even use more in an open water situation than the Texas rig worm. And that is, I'm really big on a Carolina rig. The Carolina rigs, just last week, I took a guide party out at Headwaters, and I went down to a canal that had some moving water, and we just slaughtered the bass. We caught 35 bass on this very rod, this very rig. And some people will say, well, gosh, Roland, don't you have a bead on there? No, I don't have a bead. And don't you have a $10 tungsten weight? No, I got a 50-cent, 1 ounce lead weight. Okay. And don't you have some kind of fancy swivel? No, just a regular Spro swivel. And what do I have? I have a 50-pound braid. And in this case, I have 17-pound test fluorocarbon line. Again, to a 4/0 EWG hook, and there's no weight on that. That's just the hook. You notice it's hooked the same way as the other one. That happens to be kind of a blue colored worm. I like dark worms. Okay, dark worms are kind of cool. Now, with open water, it's a kind of a different deal. There's all kind of fish out there, little ones, big ones, and here's the deal. I throw it out there, and here's the thing about a Carolina rig. You don't fish it fast. You drag it on the bottom. That's so important. I keep telling people, drag in a Carolina rig. You don't ever bounce the weight up in the air. You don't need a big expensive weight. You don't need a big $10 tungsten weight, because all you're doing is dragging that big worm weight, that big 3/4 ounce to 1 ounce lead weight. You're just dragging it on the bottom. I'm in the gravel. Again, I got it at a 45-degree angle. Now here's the thing, when he takes that worm, he's liable not to go away from you. He's liable to come towards you. Half the time he comes towards you. So instead of dragging it slow and you feel the rocks, all of a sudden you kind of feel everything kind of lighten up. Although you don't feel much. You don't feel much because he's coming towards you and he's pulling the weight towards you. In that case, here's the deal about Carolina rig fishing. I don't really set the hook real hard. I got a 50-pound braid. I got the drag pretty tight. I got the same basic rod I had before, that 7-foot medium heavy rod. I do a lot of fast reeling. I reel real fast. I reel just as fast as I can. If he doesn't have it, hey, I stop reeling. Hopefully he'll come back and hit it again. Now, what you can also do is you can feel those slow munchers. Those slow munchers are the bigger fish. If you feel a slow muncher, as soon as he kind of starts surging down with it, you can drop your rod a little bit, start reeling into him. You can set the hook. Yeah, you can set the hook. You know, really with the Carolina rig, if you got it set up right, like we had the other day at Headwaters, we caught just about every fish that bit. One guy had never really fished a Carolina rig. He caught 6 bass in a row on 6 consecutive casts. I was coaching him. I was showing him how to do it. I was showing him how to drag it. I was showing him how to reel up the line and reel up the slack and just reel into the fish. And a couple times he'd kind of reel and he wouldn't have it. I said, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it. He'll get it. He'll get it again. And sure enough, he got it again. But 6 fish in a row, and that's the kind of efficiency you can expect to have on a Carolina rig. But what I like to do also on a Carolina rig, I like to have my main line that goes to the rod and reel heavier than the leader line, for the simple reason, when I do get hung up on the bottom and there's stumps and logs and rocks to get hung on, when I do get hung, this part will break and I'll lose the worm part and the leader, and I don't lose the swivel and the weight and all that stuff, which is hard to rig up and takes time consuming. Chances are, if the leader breaks, it sometimes breaks right down here at the hook or near the hook, and all I have to do is tie another hook on and a worm, and I'm back in the game. Okay, so that Carolina rig is really, really an important thing. There's one other way of fishing open water that I really like, and I wanted to kind of tell you about, and that is a swimming worm. Now, I have all sorts of worms here, and one of the worms that I like a lot is this ultravod. Down here in Florida, this June bug, it seems to be a really good color. The red watermelon, the red is also a very good color, but the June bug seems to be awful good. Okay, now how that is, I rig it up a little different. Again, I use almost no weight, very little weight, because this is almost a surface lure now. I'm swimming this over hydrilla. I'm swimming it through the lily pads. I'm swimming it almost on the surface. And particularly in the spawning season, I'm swimming it over the shallow spawning areas and spawning beds. Even though I can't see the spawning bed, that's where I'm swimming the worm. Okay. I usually use a next size bigger hook. I usually use a number 5/0 EWG hook with that bigger worm, because that's a pretty big swimming worm. That happens to be a 1/16 of an ounce weight. Sometimes I'll go to an 1/8 ounce weight. Sometimes I'll go to a 1/4 ounce weight. Well, sometimes no weight at all. And the secret of a swimming worm is basically make a real long cast right over the grass beds. Hold your rod in kind of in a high position, just to kind of reel it. So you can even reel like this. I'm not ready to set the hook now. I'm not ready to set the hook. I'm doing just reeling it steady and slow. Just steady and slow. Steady and slow. And all of a sudden, donk! One's hit it. Now you get a lot of little fish. And they go donk, donk, donk. There'll be a lot of small ones. And I don't count those as good. But if it's that donk and just a surge away, that's a big fish. If it's donking, it could be an Oscar, it could be a bluegill, it could be a small bass. But the bigger fish, when they hit a swimming worm, I throw it out there, and I reel it on, 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 it just goes donk, and it just starts easing out. I got the rod in the right strike position. You notice I have that UGG button on this one, and that's a nice setup. I can put it in my stomach, and again, it's just like the regular Texas rig. It's just like the worm that I showed you a little bit ago. Now I can really set the hook. Boom. I got him. This is a tremendous good worm, because what this swimming worm does, it allows you to cover a lot of water. When you're in a big weedy lake like Headwaters Lake, or some of the lakes I fished up in Minnesota, where there's a lot of lily pads, a lot of underwater grasses, you can cover a lot of water, cover a lot of weed edges. And again, when you find the fish, you can then go to a slower presentation. Now let's take it to a slower presentation once you find some fish. Let's talk about a wacky rig. Aha. This is a rig, if I can find one. It's all set up just for the kind of finessey kind of deal. Once you find fish or miss a fish, or if you miss a frog fish, or if you miss a topwater fish, I like to keep a wacky rig rigged up. Now this particular wacky rig is a little bit different than some of you have seen. That happens to be just a green pumpkin color worm, and it has a little ring on it. You notice the little ring? I have this little tool. This tool allows me to slide that O-ring down the worm, and here's what I do. I slide that O-ring right down on the tube, and then I put the worm in there. I take a worm like this one, and I put it in the tube, okay, about halfway in, try around that egg sac, and roll this thing off the end of it. Donk. Okay, there. I got the little O-ring. Now, what that is, now that the O-ring's in there, you notice that holds so much better. It doesn't rip loose. That's really solid. You can catch 2 or 3 fish in a row on that thing. And because of the weed cover, and here at Lake Okeechobee as well, I'm in the reeds, and also at Headwaters, I'm working this worm. I like a weedless hook. This happens to be a 2/0. It's a Gamakatsu setup. It's called the Wicked Wacky. It's a Wicked Wacky, and this happens to be a 2/0 Wicked Wacky. Okay, I've gone a little lighter because it's a spinning rod. Now I'm saying maybe I'm using it as a backup on a frog. I'm using it as a backup on a topwater, or I'm just making target casts to say skipping it underneath the willow bushes, skipping it underneath the dock. It's a great lure. You can skip a wacky rig. Skip it. I'm talking about skipping it low to the water, skipping it way back underneath the dock, skipping it way back underneath some willows. You can do that with an unweighted wacky rig better than any other worm complement that you have. The wacky rig is just skip better. So I'm fishing a lot of docks, I'm fishing a lot of willows, I'm fishing a lot of overhanging brush, and it's mainly a target lure. This is mainly a target lure. I don't fish much open water with it, even though if I see a weed line or a deep hole in the hydrilla, then I'll just fish it. I'll just fish it right on the edge of the grass, and I'll just throw it in there, just let it sink. I don't fish it very fast. I fish a Wacky rig real slow and easy. Again, it's the same complement of setting the hook. In other words, I'm keeping that rod high, I'm twitching it along. I'm a line washer, just like I was on the other worm complements. And when I get to strike, remember that 3-second rule. I'm talking about efficiency now. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. In the hot summertime, you better be ready, and you better have your rod down to 3 seconds almost to the fish. Now, set the hook. You really get it. Now, the second you set the hook, if for whatever reason you've missed them, stop it instantly. If you, so many times I see people just reel a worm in, and so many times you'll get a bad strike, and for whatever reason you miss it, it's only gone 5 or 6 feet. Hopefully, maybe he'll come and get it again. It's quite often if you don't pull it far, just a little teeny bit, bam, he's got it a second time, and that's usually then he eats it a little bit better. So anyway, that's about 4 ways of fishing. It's the 4 ways of fishing. Again, I'm thinking about efficiency 100% of the time. The best way to set the hook, the best rod, the best setup for just catching almost every bass that bites. Remember now, try to catch 90% of all your worm fish, and you'll have a ball. You'll catch some of the biggest fish of your life. In fact, when I look back at my career, some of the biggest bass I've ever caught ever have been on a plastic worm. Hey, so hit that likes button, and I hope I taught you a few things about how to fish a plastic worm and how to be efficient fishing a plastic worm. We'll see you again soon. Hey, thanks for watching.